everyone, welcome back to Famous People English Stories. For a lot of people who listen, um, the focus is often on those big, shiny achievements, right? The finished books, the Olympic medals, maybe the huge businesses. We see the success, and well, we often think it's down to genius or maybe just luck. But today we're doing something a bit different. We're shifting focus away from that end result, the thing we celebrate, and looking directly at the engine, the thing that actually powers all success, whether you're, building something massive or just trying to get better at English.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Yeah, our mission here is to take all that crucial stuff you've sent us, the latest research, the practical guides, psychological insights, and really boil it down into knowledge you can use right away. We want to cut through the noise so you can get informed fast.
And today's deep dive is, well, it's fundamental. It's about the science and strategy of self-discipline. And look, we get the common experience. You listening right now, you have goals. You might really, really want to wake up early tomorrow. Or maybe you decide, right, I'm studying English for an hour every single day. You start out strong, loads of motivation, feels great, and then maybe 2 days later, that initial spark just fizzles out. You stop.
Mm-hmm. And that gap, that space between wanting something and doing it consistently, that's what we're really tackling today. This deep dive is set up to show you, using practical sourced methods, how you can build that inner fire, the one that, outlasts the spark. We're looking at why discipline is just so much more effective than trying to ride the wave of motivation, and how you can actually start building that reliable daily engine yourself.
Okay, so let's kick off right at the start. Self-discipline. It's a word we throw around a lot, but what, in a really practical sense, are we actually talking about here?
Well, at its most basic level, the source material defines it as uh, the ability to choose to do what you need to do,
Hmm.
even when you really, really don't feel like doing it. It's fundamentally about choice. It means having that sort of immediate power to override your short-term comfort, that urge to just relax, or the desire for something easy right now, yeah, in favor of a longer-term goal, something that's actually more important to you.
Right. So it's like a mechanism then for putting your future self ahead of your present self, making the call based on importance, not just how you feel in the moment.
Precisely, yeah. And if we look at the specific examples that come up in the sources, that moment of choice becomes really clear. Think about learning a language like English. You get home maybe after a really long, tiring day at work. You just feel drained. And your brain is screaming, just watch TV, put your feet up, you deserve it. Discipline is making the choice right then to sit down for, say, 30 minutes, even though you're tired or busy, and actually do your English study. It's the choice you make against that path of least resistance.
Yeah. It's like fighting gravity, isn't it? The pull towards just comfort. We see it every morning with the alarm clock struggle. Discipline means getting out of that warm, comfy bed, even when it's cold, or you desperately want just 5 more minutes. Because you've decided, you've committed to an early study session or maybe getting some exercise in.
Or another good example is food choices. Choosing to prep and eat something healthy takes discipline, because the alternative, the easy bag of chips, fast food, sugary stuff that gives you instant pleasure, right? But it's fleeting. Discipline means saying no to that immediate hit for a better long-term outcome. It's the ability to manage not just your actions, but also your thoughts and emotions. It's driven by what the sources sometimes call a strong inner voice. It just says, keep going, this matters.
That sounds, well, it sounds kind of tough, maybe even a bit grim, like constant self-denial. Is discipline really about just being miserable until you finally hit your goal?
So this is a really common misunderstanding, and it's something the source material actually works quite hard to correct. Discipline isn't about turning into a robot or denying yourself any pleasure at all. Not really. It's more about aligning your small, everyday actions with what you actually value, with your long-term goals. It's about setting up a system, a framework for action, so that putting in consistent effort actually gets easier over time.
Yeah.
And here's the really empowering bit, the core insight for you, the listener, which is central to this whole deep dive. Self-discipline is not something you're just born with. It's not an innate trait.
So you don't just have it or not have it. You don't have to wish you were, wired differently. Yeah.
Exactly. It can be built. It can be trained, strengthened, just like a muscle. It needs exercise. And the key is understand how to train it properly. You don't walk into a gym on day one and try to lift like 200 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
You start small, small reps. The sources really stress this.
Yeah.
You don't need to aim for perfection right away. What you need is small daily practice. That repetition, even when it feels tiny or imperfect, that's the mechanism that strengthens the discipline muscle week after week, month after month.
Okay, right. Let's dig into this next point because this feels like where we move from just defining it to actually strategizing. A lot of people, myself included sometimes, genuinely think that if they just find the perfect YouTube video or, that one amazing quote, that feeling, that buzz of excitement will somehow just carry them all the way to success.
Yeah.
But our sources draw a really crucial strategic line in the sand here. Why is discipline fundamentally more reliable, more important than motivation?
Yeah, this is a great distinction. Think of it like this. Motivation is like a spark, maybe even a firework, an event. It's temporary, often really intense. This burst of feeling could be dopamine-fueled excitement, maybe a sudden rush of inspiration, and it feels amazing. But the sources, they're really clear. Motivation is unreliable because it comes and goes. It just does. It's totally subject to your mood, what's happening around you, how tired you are. You feel like Superman one day and then the next. Totally flat, lazy.
Right. And if your whole plan for success is tied to something that's guaranteed to bounce around like that, your progress is going to look like a roller coaster, isn't it? You'll have these huge, intense bursts of activity and then suddenly, nothing. Complete stops.
Absolutely, that's the trap. Discipline, on the other hand, is described really nicely as a fire that burns slowly every day. It operates whether you're feeling great or feeling rubbish. It's the commitment to the process itself. That commitment maintains forward movement, keeps things ticking over, even when that initial emotional buzz has completely vanished. This steady, consistent, maybe even slightly boring, low-level burn. That's the bedrock of any real lasting progress.
Okay, let's make this concrete with that example from the sources the student Ollie learning English. He gets super motivated on Monday, maybe watches an inspiring video, and bam, studies for 2 solid hours. Feels amazing about it.
Yeah, he gets that instant hit of achievement, feels like he's absolutely smashed it. But because his effort was totally dependent on that high emotional state, Tuesday rolls around, he's tired, maybe stressed from work, just not in the mood. So he skips it. Wednesday, well, the momentum's gone. He kind of forgets, drifts back into his old routine, and his learning just stops, dead in its tracks.
And that sudden stop is the real killer, isn't it? Especially for something like learning. If you think about language learning, Ali basically wasted the benefit of that huge Monday effort because languages need repeated exposure, reinforcing those pathways in the brain. Inconsistency undermines that.
That's exactly right. Real long-term progress, it just never comes from those big, flashy, infrequent bursts of excitement. It comes from continuous, smaller effort applied consistently. If Ollie had discipline, maybe he'd only manage 20 minutes each day. That doesn't sound like much compared to 2 hours. But doing that 20 minutes consistently Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that is way, way better mathematically and neurologically than those 2-hour sprints that just disappear when the mood changes.
It's almost like compound interest versus winning a small lottery prize, right?
Yeah.
The lottery win is the big motivational burst, nice, but gone quickly. The compound interest is the small, steady, disciplined deposit that grows, almost unnoticed at first, but becomes huge over time.
That's a perfect analogy. It really holds. The difference is the cumulative effect. The person who only works when they feel motivated might only work, say, 50% of the time. And often they're starting cold each time, so it's less effective. The disciplined person, they might be working 90–95% of the time, even if it's less intense some days. The gap between those two approaches becomes massive over a year. So the core insight for you, the listener, is that consistency, even if it feels painfully small sometimes, is the only reliable path to getting good at something. You've got to be steady.
And when we look at those really successful people, the research mentions the top athletes, the writers who publish regularly, the business leaders. What we're often seeing isn't necessarily more motivation than the rest of us, but just much better discipline.
Exactly right. The secret isn't that they leap out of bed every single day, fired up and excited to, I don't know, tackle a complex spreadsheet or write a really difficult chapter. They have bad moods too. They get tired. They feel resistance, just like everyone. But they are simply more disciplined. They've built systems, routines that ensure they show up and do the work, regardless of how they feel inside. They've learned deep down that waiting to feel like it is basically just waiting to fail.
Wow, that's a really powerful way to reframe it. It means the success we admire isn't usually some sudden, glamorous bolt from the blue. It's more often the result of boring, predictable, daily commitment. Discipline builds strong habits, and those habits eventually build success.
Okay, so if the aim is to show up every day, we obviously need something that makes showing up easier, right? Less of a fight. This brings us very neatly into the most practical bit of our deep dive, actually building discipline through small daily habits.
Yeah, the idea of automation seems really key here. When an action becomes a habit, it means you don't need to rely so much on willpower. And the source material really hammers this home. Willpower is limited. It's like a phone battery that just drains throughout the day every time you have to make a tough, conscious choice.
And that's precisely why habits are, the disciplined person's secret weapon.
Yeah.
When something becomes automatic, like brushing your teeth or getting dressed, you don't burn any mental energy deciding whether or not to do it. You just do it. That decision fatigue is gone, which frees up your limited willpower battery for the stuff that's genuinely hard,
Mhm.
like, understanding a tricky bit of English grammar or trying to hold a complex conversation.
So the less energy we waste fighting ourselves on the small stuff, the more juice we have left for the actual work.
Okay.
So what are some specific starter habits the sources suggest? Things that can build that initial bit of momentum.
Well, the first one was almost laughably simple, but it pops up everywhere, even in like military training stuff. Making your bed.
Making the bed. Really, it sounds so small, almost trivial. How does tidying your duvet actually help you study English?
It's psychological. It creates this tiny positive feedback loop right at the start of your day.
Mm.
And it establishes microcontrol. By making the bed, you've done the first task you set out to do. Boom. Small win. You've proven to yourself before you've even had coffee that you can follow through on something and bring a little order to your world. That builds momentum. It creates a feeling of being in control, just a tiny bit. And that feeling can then carry over into tackling bigger, more focused things, like starting your study session. You kick off the day feeling slightly more organized and competent.
Okay, I can see that. And for me, the planning side really clicks writing a short to-do list each morning. But the key detail here from the sources is the limit. Don't write down 20 things you hope to achieve.
No, absolutely not. That just sets you up for feeling overwhelmed and giving up. The advice is really specific. Limit it to just 3 or maybe 4 things you absolutely must get done today. That keeps it manageable, focuses your energy. If you tick off those 4 things, and one of them might be your 20 minutes of English practice, you get a real concrete sense of accomplishment and control at the end of the day. No, it works.
Right. So beyond those first steps, the sources go into other practical habits that kind of stabilize the whole system.
Definitely. Stabilizing your body clock is a big one. So waking up at the same time every day,
Yeah.
yes, even on weekends, sorry, it reduces that sort of metabolic fog that can sap your energy and weaken your resolve. And then there are habits that protect your focus, protect the environment for discipline.
Which means dealing with distractions. That feels like the biggest battle for most of us today.
Yeah, and the advice here is pretty blunt but necessary. When it's time to work or study, you have to physically remove the temptation. Put the phone away. Not just on silent next to you, ideally. Put it in another room or in a drawer.
Yeah.
Turn off all those little pop-up notifications on your computer. If the temptation's right there, your discipline muscle is constantly flexing just to resist picking it up. And like we said, that muscle gets tired fast. By creating that physical distance, you use discipline once the act of moving the phone, and then you benefit for the entire study period.
And we shouldn't forget the sort of maintenance habits either, like taking short breaks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Taking short mental breaks isn't laziness. It's actually a disciplined act of self-management, recognizing that intense focus needs recovery time. And the simple physical stuff, too, like making sure you drink water first thing in the morning. These small acts of self-care are also acts of discipline. They make sure your body and mind are actually capable of supporting the bigger efforts, like learning a language.
Okay, so we have these individual small habits. Now, the sources talk about something called habit stacking, which sounds really powerful for actually getting these things to stick.
Yes, this is where we really start to use how our brains are wired. Habit stacking is basically connecting a new habit you want to form, let's call it X, to a habit you already do without thinking, let's call it Y. The formula is simple. After I do existing habit Y, I will do new habit X. This just makes the new habit much easier to remember and actually do.
How does that work exactly? Why does linking it to something old make it easier?
Because the existing habit Y already has a well-worn path in your brain, a neural pathway. Your brain doesn't need to fire up the decision-making part, the prefrontal cortex, for it. So when you finish Y, maybe it's brushing your teeth or finishing your morning coffee,
Yeah.
your brain is already kind of primed for the next step. By deliberately linking your new habit, say, listen to a 5-minute English podcast, right after that coffee, you piggyback on the existing automation. You reduce the need for conscious thought or willpower to get started.
That is really clever because it tackles that problem of starting. You know, if you're waiting for the perfect quiet hour to magically appear in your day, it might never happen. But if you link 15 minutes of English practice directly to something you already do, like finishing breakfast, it's much more likely to just happen.
Exactly. It anchors the practice. It gives it a specific time and context. Setting that fixed time right after breakfast or maybe just before you go to sleep is incredibly important according to the sources. Structure supports discipline.
And if we're giving advice to you, the listener, on where to begin with all this, the absolute key message seems to be start small, go for gradual growth. Don't try to overhaul your entire life overnight.
No, please don't. That's just a recipe for burnout and feeling like a failure. The advice is very clear. Pick one small habit. Maybe it is making your bed. Maybe it's reading one page of an English book. Maybe it's learning 2 new words. Just one. And practice it every single day. Discipline isn't a switch you flip. It's something that grows little by little. You're building capacity. Even if it's just 10 minutes of practice, that tiny, consistent effort is what compounds over time. Okay, but all this this dedicated daily grind, it needs a point, right? It needs a target. Otherwise, you're just being disciplined for the sake of it, which can get frustrating fast. So this brings us to section 3, the crucial role of setting clear goals and, importantly, making a plan.
Yeah, this feels like where it all connects. If discipline is the engine, the car, then goals are the destination on the sat nav. They show you where you actually want to end up. And the planning part, that's the actual route guidance, the step-by-step directions to get there without getting lost.
Right. If you try to be disciplined without a clear goal, it really is like just driving around aimlessly. Sure, you're driving, you're using fuel, but you'll probably just wander off down interesting side roads, get distracted, maybe completely lost, and eventually you'll just run out of gas or motivation and pull over.
Yeah.
The goal is like your compass point, the thing that justifies putting in the effort each day.
So clarity is step 1. The sources make a big deal about the difference between just vague wishes and actual clear goals. Like the wishes, oh, I want to be better at English. But a clear goal is specific, measurable. Something like, I will be able to discuss my job confidently in English within 6 months. Or maybe I will read one complete English novel in the next 30 days.
And crucially, this is really important. The sources hammer home the need to actually write these goals down. Writing them down does something. It takes them out of the realm of just a fleeting thought or a daydream and makes them feel more concrete, more like a real commitment. The physical act of writing engages different parts of your brain, makes the goal feel tangible, actionable. It's a step towards making it happen.
Okay, so you've got your clear written goal. Then the planning stage is about breaking down that potentially huge, scary mountain into small, manageable steps, right?
Exactly. Planning demystifies the whole process. It takes something that feels overwhelming, like become fluent in English, and translates it into simple, repeatable things you can do every day. So the plan might look like, right, step one, practice speaking for 15 minutes a day, maybe recording yourself. Step two, watch one English YouTube video or short documentary each evening. Step three, learn and try to use 5 new words each morning.
And those small, repeatable actions become the daily tasks, the things that feed the discipline engine. But how do you keep the motivation up for those daily steps? This is where tracking your progress comes in, and it seems surprisingly powerful.
Oh, tracking is huge. Probably the biggest reinforcement loop in this whole system. It turns your effort, which can feel abstract, into immediate visible evidence. Every single time you physically tick a box or cross something off a list, yep, did my 15-minute speaking practice, learned my 5 words today, you get a little hit of success.
Right, that feeling of, I did it today. It gives you that little boost, that positive reinforcement, which makes you more likely to want to do it again tomorrow. It changes the work from just being this ongoing, maybe vague effort into something concrete, something you can actually see yourself achieving day by day.
And the sources also warn against making those initial goals too massive. We really need to emphasize the power of small wins here. If your goal is huge and you only manage to do like 1% of it each day, it can actually be demotivating.
So keep it simple to start. If you're struggling with, say, speaking practice, maybe set a goal like this week I will learn 10 new English words related to my hobby, or today I will speak English out loud for 5 minutes without stopping to correct myself. These small victories are vital for building confidence, for proving to yourself that you can be disciplined. So the process is set clear goals, write them down, break them into a simple plan, do the tiny steps, and track every bit of progress. Okay, I get the theory, the framework, but let's be real. Let's talk about the reality that Ali and you listening face every single day. Discipline isn't always easy. It's not a smooth path. It's full of obstacles, roadblocks. We all hit them. If discipline is fundamentally a fight against wanting comfort, how does just starting for 5 minutes really beat that bone deep exhaustion you feel after, say, a 12-hour shift? What do the sources say about tackling that real world fatigue and resistance?
That's a really critical question because just trying to brute force it with willpower when you're genuinely exhausted, well, that's often just going to lead to failure and feeling bad about yourself. The sources identify 4 main challenges, and they all need smart strategies, not just more effort. Laziness, or maybe just that feeling of inertia, often linked to fatigue, is the first one.
And the well-known solution offered is the 5-minute trick. Just tell yourself, okay, I'll only do it for 5 minutes.
Yes, and you're right to question how effective that can be against real exhaustion. It works, or rather, it often works, because our brains tend to resist starting something much more fiercely than they resist continuing it once we've begun. Think of it like trying to push a really heavy, stuck object. The hardest part is getting it moving initially, breaking that static inertia. By committing to only 5 minutes, you drastically lower that mental barrier to entry. You're basically tricking your brain's initial resistance. What often happens is once you're actually engaged, once you've pushed through that initial 5-minute barrier, you find you do have a bit more energy to keep going. The resistance itself often dissolves once you're in motion.
Okay, that reframe helps. It's about beating the inertia, not necessarily conquering the whole task in one go. Got it. Roadblock number 2, distractions. The absolute discipline killer of our times.
Yeah, the sources are pretty uncompromising on this. If you're trying to work or study in an environment that's full of easy distractions, you are essentially choosing to make things incredibly difficult for yourself. The solution has to be physical and environmental. You need to consciously create a quiet space, maybe even a slightly boring space, that's dedicated to focus. Turn off the notifications, and like we mentioned earlier, physically remove the phone, put it in another room, put it in a drawer, whatever it takes. Set up a firewall against those easy temptations.
Okay. Challenge number 3, the classic, I just don't have time. Everyone feels too busy. Where am I going to find 20 minutes for English?
This one requires a really important shift in perspective, something the source material highlights. Everyone, the busiest CEO, the most overloaded student, everyone gets 24 hours in a day. The issue usually isn't a genuine lack of any time. It's about time management and, more importantly, priority setting. The key is to honestly look at where your time is currently going and then consciously make time for what you've decided is important. And the material reassures us, even just 10 or 15 minutes a day, snatched during a commute or over lunch or just before bed, it really does add up over time. If something is truly a priority, discipline finds a way to carve out that time. It doesn't just wait for a convenient gap to magically appear.
Right. And the last one, which can be really disheartening, is giving up too early. The person who works really hard for 2 weeks, maybe they don't suddenly feel fluent and they just think this isn't working, it's impossible for me. This happens a lot, especially with language learning where progress isn't always linear.
This one needs a serious dose of patience and an understanding that learning skill acquisition, it's often not a smooth upward curve. There are plateaus, dips even. Success takes time, and the results often aren't immediately obvious day to day. Discipline is that muscle you train daily, and you have to resist expecting instant transformation. Also, when you hit those inevitable plateaus, maybe your pronunciation isn't improving, or vocabulary just won't stick it. The sources suggest a disciplined learner doesn't just stop. They might shift their focus slightly. They apply their consistency to a different kind of practice for a while, maybe switching from intense reading to more listening comprehension, or focusing on fluency over accuracy for a bit, rather than just throwing in the towel altogether.
And what about when we inevitably slip up? Because even with the best intentions, we're all going to miss a day of practice eventually.
Yes, and the sources are really strong on handling mistakes with self-compassion. If you miss a day, the absolute worst thing you can do is let that one slip, define you, or spiral into self-criticism. Saying, oh, I'm useless, I knew I couldn't do this, that just leads to giving up completely. Instead, the disciplined approach is to acknowledge it, okay, I missed yesterday, accept it without harsh judgment, and then commit firmly to getting right back on track today or the very next day. That resilience, that ability to just reboot and re-engage your discipline after a wobble, that's actually a really advanced form of self-discipline itself. Being kind to yourself is part of the building process.
Okay, this feels like the perfect place to bring it all home, right to the core reason why you, our listener, are probably tuned in. Let's really focus all this knowledge directly onto the learner. How does self-discipline give you a specific, measurable edge when you're trying to get fluent in English?
Well, fundamentally, it translates into the difference between actually getting there versus staying stuck.
Yeah.
Success in learning, especially something complex like a language, it just isn't built on one big, amazing effort. It's not about watching one incredible movie without subtitles or reading one really hard book. It's about the unglamorous, maybe even slightly boring commitment to show up every day. Showing up even when the grammar point is confusing, showing up when you're tired, showing up when you just don't feel like it. That daily consistency is the compounding interest when it comes to learning.
So, discipline means pushing yourself to actually engage with the language even when you don't feel that spark of motivation. Can we list some really specific disciplined actions for language learning, things beyond just vaguely studying?
Absolutely. The sources point to very specific, active routines. For example, instead of just passively having an English podcast playing in the background while you do chores, a disciplined action is actively listening during your walk or commute, maybe even pausing and repeating phrases, turning that dead time to focus practice time. Or, instead of just reading a list of new vocabulary words, a disciplined learner forces themselves to actually use those words, maybe by trying to speak for 10 minutes, even if it's just talking to themselves, working those new words into sentences, focusing on getting the sounds right.
So that's a key difference. Disciplined learning focuses on active production and engagement, not just passive consumption of information. Discipline makes you do the harder, more effective thing.
Exactly. And discipline is absolutely vital for pushing through those frustrating plateaus. You know, that stage where you feel like you're working hard, but your progress just seems to have stalled. Your pronunciation isn't getting better. Vocabulary isn't sticking. A disciplined person doesn't take that as a sign to quit. They understand it's part of the process, that learning is likely still happening under the surface. They use their discipline to stick to the plan, maybe enforcing review routines, like using flashcards for just 5 minutes every morning to really drill that vocabulary instead of just hoping it sinks in eventually.
And when we look at people who have successfully learned languages, the consistent ones, it often seems to confirm this, doesn't it? They don't always seem like linguistic geniuses. They just seem incredibly consistent.
That really is the big takeaway from the research in this area. The people who achieve fluency, who really master the language, they're very rarely the ones who started out with the highest natural aptitude or the quickest memory. They are simply the consistent ones. They're the ones who built a routine and stuck to it. They watch their videos daily, they repeat things out loud, they write down new words and review them, they find ways to practice speaking regularly. Their fluency becomes an almost mechanical, predictable result of that disciplined repetition, much more than any innate gift.
So we keep coming back to the power of those small daily routines. That 15 or 20 minutes every day might not feel like much today, but it quickly shifts from being something you force yourself to do to becoming a habit you barely think about. And eventually it just becomes part of your lifestyle, the natural way you approach your learning goal.
And that really leads us to the final essential mindset shift for you, the listener. You cannot wait for the perfect conditions. Don't wait for the right time when you feel less busy or more motivated or suddenly inspired. That perfect time is probably never going to arrive. The perfect time to start is right now. Discipline is the tool that lets you begin even when life is messy and still make progress.
Yeah. Think of self-discipline as your superpower. It's your most reliable friend on this journey to fluency. It keeps you pointed in the right direction, keeps you moving forward, ensures you grow slowly, maybe, but surely day after day through that steady burn of consistent effort.
Wow. Okay, that was an incredible deep dive into really the architecture of how things get done. We started by defining self-discipline not as some kind of punishment, but as that consistent daily choice to put your future goals ahead of immediate comfort.
And we really established why that choice is so critical, showing how the slow, steady fire of discipline is just fundamentally stronger and more reliable than that fleeting, unpredictable spark of motivation. And then we got practical, giving you the blueprint for building it, talking about the power of automating things through small, easy starter habits, like the surprising momentum you get from just making your bed and using habit stacking to cleverly weave new learning into your existing day.
Yeah, and crucially, we tackled those big four roadblocks head on. Laziness, distractions, the no time excuse, and the temptation to quit too soon. We offered actual source-backed strategies like the 5-minute trick to just get started and using environmental control to beat those digital distractions.
And finally, we brought it all back specifically to you and your language learning goals, stressing that consistent, active practice, day in and day out, is the only reliable way to break through those inevitable plateaus and actually reach fluency.
So now it really is over to you listening right now. Remember, you don't need to aim for perfection straight away. You just need to aim for consistency. So we challenge you, take action today. Pick one small, genuinely achievable English goal for just this week. Make a simple plan. Maybe write it down. Use habit stacking to link it to something you already do, and then follow through every day, even if it's only for 10 minutes. Just start.
If you can commit to that, just that small step, you will honestly be amazed at the foundation you build in just a month, or 3 months, let alone a year. That tiny incremental progress feels invisible day to day, but it adds up to something massive over time.
And remember this thought as you go forward. Discipline truly is the bridge between your goals and your success. The fluency you want, the promotion, whatever achievement you're aiming for, it's almost never a single heroic leap across a huge gap. It's a bridge built one small disciplined step at a time, laying down the path right under your feet as you move forward. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and keep learning.